Good morning, everybody. I hope the sight lines are okay. I am Matthew Littleford, the General Manager of BBC Worldwide's Global iPlayer. And I'm afraid I've got a kind of a speech, so if I keep looking up and down, that's what I'm kind of doing. I'm not navel-gazing, I'm just merely reading. This morning, I'm going to talk to you about the Global iPlayer, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of the product itself. Then I'm going to cover off some of the guiding principles that have led us to where we are today, and then I'm also going to share some of the insights that we've also kind of learnt. There's going to be a whole host of slides that are kind of coming up as well. But before I do that, I want to just kind of give you a very quick overview of what BBC Worldwide is and who we are. Obviously, we are very much the kind of the commercial arm of the BBC. We exist to generate profits and are also always going to be reinvested back into the BBC in the UK on behalf of licence fee payers. And of course, that just is the top line and doesn't really tell you half the story. What's really important for us is the content that we can bring to the party. With over 75 years in television business, the BBC obviously has become the creator and the keeper of some of the greatest range of content in the world. And as a whole, we own some of the best known and best loved brands. And at the moment, what BBC Worldwide does is to take these brands to consumers in a very much in kind of a whole host of different ways. So we've got a vast channel portfolio, we've got sales of programs and formats to broadcasters around the world, we've got a robust DVD sales business in the UK as well as kind of globally, and obviously we've kind of got download to own. And in the last financial year, BBC Worldwide generated profits of about 160 million on sales of 1.1 bill. But enough of that, that's just kind of top line. I'm here really to kind of talk about iPlayer. So, as General Manager of the Global iPlayer, my job is very much to kind of oversee the business as it goes through its pilot phase. We launched in July of last year, and then since then we've rolled out in 16 countries across Europe, Canada, and of course the last one was Australia. We initially launched as an iPad app, but based on the success of that, we've now also gone on to other iOS platforms, including iPhone and iPod Touch. Now, I'm very much kind of aware that I represent the global wing of iPlayer, and so it very much kind of exists outside of the UK. So some of you may not have even seen the service. You may think of it very much from a public service point of view. So I want to just kind of very, very quickly explain our approach. Okay, so the original inspiration was obviously BBC's public service iPlayer, and it's an amazing, amazing beast. It is still very much kind of one of the leading examples of broadcaster video on demand services anywhere in the world, and it currently serves over 150 million requests a month for television and radio content. Now, we wanted to go and take iPlayer out into the global market. So, of course, we were going to have to do something very, very different to what public service has. The public service iPlayer is very much a catch-up service, showing content from the last 7 days of linear broadcast on the domestic channels. Clearly, most of those channels don't exist outside of the UK, and so this approach obviously completely wouldn't have made sense to a global market. So we were going to have to mine the BBC's archive very much in a different way. Also, we're the commercial arm of the BBC, and we're here to make money. And so we weren't going to give our project away and our product away for free. In this phase of the project, the app is definitely free to download, and with that, you get free content. But you also have to pay if you want to kind of see the 2,000 hours of content. And currently, it's €6.99 a month or €64.99 for an annual subscription. And you get a huge amount of great, really, really amazing and brilliant content. Anyway, as I've said, we're fundamentally different from the UK iPlayer. So rather than offering this catch-up service, we understood that our overseas audiences were looking very much for an editorialized selection of new and archived content, showcasing primarily BBC content from our huge library, as well as the best of British television from other producers. So in addition to programs made by the BBC like Top Gear and Doctor Who, we've also got shows from other British production companies, such as Sherlock from Hartswood, Steve Coogan, The Inside Story from Baby Cow, Wallander from Left Bank, Whitechapel from Carnival, and a number of others from DRG and Hattrick. And I'm really, really pleased to announce today that also we've just done our first global acquisitions deal with So Television, and they're the makers of Graham Norton, So we've got the most fabulous classic and contemporary episodes for him that we're going to then just kind of start to go out into our territories. So the global iPlayer, at its heart, aims to bring the best of British programming to an international audience. And securing deals like so are really, really important to us. And they help us fulfill our ambition to be a much bigger global digital player. What's important for us is that every single show on the pilot of the global iPlayer has been editorially selected by my team and obviously presented to people to help them discover and learn and engage with the service in a way that a simple catalogue of shows just don't do. For me, I always want to kind of use that kind of comparison between a supermarket and a boutique store. You know, in a supermarket, you've got a huge amount of product, and it's just kind of piled high in aisle after aisle of faceless displays. And most of the stuff that you need is kind of out there, but it can take a while to find, and it's never going to be the most specialist products that you might want. More importantly, in a world where your choice is very much kind of unguided, you're never going to find the things that you didn't know you want. The hidden gems that you'd love, but you just didn't know exist. Like Ghostwatch. You've never heard of it? It was aired in 1992 on BBC. It starred Michael Parkinson. It was a mockumentary. Everybody thought it was real. It freaked the BBC out. The people complained to the Trust. It was banned the day after. We've got it. We're showing it on iPlayer, and it's doing incredibly well. So, obviously, in your boutique store, and like us at iPlayer, an expert shopkeeper has selected products that they know customers will like, and they've made them easier to discover, and they help you find things that you didn't know you wanted. So you might come into iPlayer for the latest episode of Lark Rise to Candleford, but you might end up finding something else that's, you know, that you hadn't realised that you wanted to watch, like the Blackadder Christmas Special, or classic episodes of Porridge, or Steptoe and Son, or The Likely Hads. This is what our editorial curation is about. It's about selecting the right content for each market and then presenting it in a way that encourages our users to find and view more. What's more, it's about making serendipity a value rather than just an accident. Using curation, we can broaden our users' consumption, helping them to find new and fabulous content that they might otherwise not have seen. For example, rather than just sticking up a whole truckload of modern Doctor Who's, we'll create a journey that will show the history of the show, such as our Doctor Who, the William Hartnell years, or our Daleks Forever collection, which use the iconic characters as a thread to lead you through a whole range of Doctors, past and present. For me, the editorial journey is absolutely where we're doing something different from the majority of the video-on-demand services that are also on the market. And for us, we see this approach as really working. 80% of our users access the app each week, watching about 30 minutes of content or so when they do. And that's actually quite comparative to a lot of digital satellite channels in the UK, that kind of holds up really, really well. More excitingly, the homepage screen, where we focus a lot of our editorial curation, is the most popular area of the app. 35% of our users watch more than one program, and 25% browse the app after watching something else. All of this clearly suggests that the concept of editorial journeys is absolutely having an effect and taking people to new places and showing them content that they may not have already seen. Another important part of our editorialization, obviously, is social media. Clearly, as a digital product, our users are already engaged with the web. Moreover, the BBC Global iPlayer service is in trial phase right now, and so their feedback is really, really important to us into how we develop our brand further. Making the most of a two-way power of social media has been vital for us in helping to guide the product in terms of its functionality, its content, and its basic approach. We've got about 20,000 followers across platforms like Facebook and Twitter, and whilst that's not a massive number, by no means long stretch of the imagination, the feedback that we've had from them has been incredibly invaluable to help us develop and further our product. So we recently announced that we were going to kind of do radio and audio content on the app and just kind of take BBC's radios 1, 2, 3, and 4 into our service That came about because people on Twitter and Facebook said, why are you not doing it? And we thought, hey, that's a really, really interesting, a really good idea. Similarly, they help us to define the shows that we put on the app on a territory-by-territory basis. So, for example, users using social media, we had a really big campaign in Canada, bizarrely, for Waking the Dead, and they really desperately wanted to see it. And so, throughout February, we gave them what they asked for. Similarly, when we kind of launched our arts and culture section on the app, we listened to what users wanted. They came back and they said they wanted to see Wonderland and the culture show, and we were like, okay, that's great. That's the type of content that we will put on and that we will serve to you. Look, I know it's kind of tremendously fashionable at the moment to talk about the integration of social media and traditional television properties, but that's not what we're doing here. We're not tacking on a new medium to an established format. Social media has always been baked into kind of, where we are and kind of what we do. And for me, it's about kind of integrating that and the functionality in the shows that our users clearly tell us that they want to kind of see. So, when I tell people about what we've done, that we're going to be launching this big global video on demand position, their first question is why? And they always ask the why because BBC Worldwide has a perfectly wonderful business going already. It's working, in an established ecosystem with valued partners. It's using our historical and new assets to generate revenue from the BBC's creativity. And for me, that's why it's important that we kind of, are part of that mix. And I think that the global iPlayer can bring something else to the market. I think that something that brings value to BBC Worldwide and something that brings entertainment into people's lives. For me, the first and the most important reason we've launched the global iPlayer is because we know it's what our viewers want. There's no denying that video on demand is popular based on the experiences of the UK iPlayer. And our launches in other territories and of the video on demand market in general just kind of go to prove that. Viewers want to watch television on new digital platforms and in new locations, whether that be on a train, in a room, in another part of their house, yada, yada, yada. And we want to give them that ability to do and watch what they want. At every level, we're about giving users what they want, and this is the most fundamental part of why we've gone down this road. But if you want another reason why we've done this, think about Kodak. Kodak was the first company to make a low-price camera. They made a small profit on hardware sales, but the majority of their revenues came from the chemicals used to develop film. As time went on, they grew and they researched new and innovative technologies in photography. And of course, one of them was the digital camera. Admittedly, it was the size of a toaster. It did take 23 seconds to take a picture, and it only had 1/10 of a megapixel. But it was clearly the forerunner of the devices that are now ubiquitous around the world. So they were the first people to create a digital camera. However, Kodak went bankrupt in January this year. How could a company which invented the digital camera have gone bankrupt? Well, they came up with the idea, and that idea was rejected by the owners as they feared it would cannibalize their core business. They didn't cannibalize their core business, but the rest of the market did. Now, for me, does any of that kind of sound familiar? The Kodak moment, for me, is a tipping point where a company can set itself up for the future or consign itself to long-term obsolescence. It isn't just something that happened this isn't just something that happened in photography. It's something that's happening in nearly every area of media and entertainment, not just in television. Now look, linear television isn't far from let me start that sentence again. Linear television definitely isn't dead. Far from it. And I'm not saying that traditional television is going to disappear tomorrow or even in 10 years' time. But what I am saying is that alternatives to linear are already very much there. It's vital for us, it's therefore vital for us as a business to be aware of that and to be preparing for a future in which they become a key part of the market. We're having our Kodak moment right now, and we don't want to be the guys who invent the future of television and then decide that we'd rather pretend it really wasn't happening. Where I think Global iPlayer differs from the Kodak scenario is that we're not in the business of cannibalization. Instead, we're offering a complementary service and an additive viewing experience. Kodak aside, one of the most exciting reasons for undertaking this project is the potential that it's opened up for real customer insight. BBC Worldwide has traditionally been one step removed from its consumers. In the main, our channels are shown on other people's platforms, or our shows are on other people's channels. In the past, the only indication we've had of whether a show is liked or not is through capturing the viewing figures in each territory where our partners are distributing our content. This might give us an indication of how many people are watching a show, but it really doesn't tell us anything else. With the global iPlayer, however, we've got a direct feedback channel that gives us territory-by-territory insight into what people are watching, when they're watching, how long for, on what device, and what they subsequently go on to watch when the show is completed. For a content owner like ourselves, this insight is massively valuable, and not just in the optimization of our video-on-demand service to improve our user experience. Down the line, we want to be feeding real-life consumer insight into the development of new properties, formats, or approaches that are influenced by what users are telling us. The whole idea of disintermediation for content owners is something that's been largely unexplored in a video-on-demand world that's mostly focused on land grab. However, for an organization like us, that's a content owner as well as a content distribution platform, there's a massive value in this data. Another reason for us to build the global iPlayer has been to look at new ways of opening up our archive. We want to let our consumers across a whole range of programs that might otherwise have not made it onto linear television and channels. The challenge of holding a massive and diverse archive in a linear world is still very much always the long tail. Whilst our top shows will always have a regular airing on linear channels, it's always going to be hard for broadcasters to find space for the whole breadth and range of content that we offer in a finite broadcasting schedules. With a service like ours, however, this scarcity of display is no longer an issue. We can have just as much content as we like on the global iPlayer, whether that's the latest series of a big name like Top Gear, or more specialist content such as 10 Years in Afghanistan, which is an amazingly groundbreaking user-generated documentary about the war on terror. As such, for us, a platform like this is the ideal place to let users access the broad range of content that we have to offer. The potential for the long tail is significant. We know that our users want to access a whole range of content that we hold in the vaults, and the global iPlayer is the perfect channel, note the word channel, through which to distribute it. Another reason I'm excited by the global iPlayer is that I think this sort of major global product and project is vital in more broadly proving the potential of VOD as a medium. I'm convinced that on-demand is going to be a really, really big part of television's future. And I want to use the global iPlayer as a case study to make that point. This is why we've launched the service as a pilot initially. We wholeheartedly believe in the potential, but we recognize that no one as yet has got the perfect recipe for success. We have to have the flexibility to adjust and adapt our approach over time, working with our viewers and local clients until we hit the sweet spot. Global iPlayer isn't just letting us prove a point. It's helping us to build a picture of what's necessary to achieve the promise that we believe is inherent in the medium. So, that's a bit about what we're doing, and why we're doing it in a general sense, but what's the story with our users? As it happens, most of them come from down under. Australia is our biggest market to date, despite having only been active for a few short months. Indeed, Australia is now larger in terms of subscription numbers than our second and third countries, which is Germany and Holland combined. Across all of our territories, our average subscriber watches about 15 shows every month, which is roughly 4 a week, which is quite significant. The device story is also quite an interesting one. 17% of our subscribers access the app on multiple devices, and 8% of subscribers don't have an iPad, implying that they're watching content on iPhone, iPod Touch, or connecting to a big screen via HDMI. This is very much broadly reflective of what we've seen elsewhere, but it's already an indication that this simply isn't a toy for affluent tablet owners. What's also interesting here is the importance of watching on the big screen. Using an iPad can be a solitary experience, but by using HDMI or AirPlay, people are experiencing the global BBC iPlayer as an additive in-home channel for accessing content that they can't get elsewhere. We're also seeing significant demand for content to be viewed out of the home. Overall, a fifth of content is being viewed using our download to view offline functionality, implying that people are accessing content to watch while traveling or commuting. Now, in terms of when people are watching, we are, by and large, seeing confirmation of what we've learned elsewhere, that global iPlayer viewing habits are almost analogous to linear habits. The evening spikes take place between 5 and 11. Peak is at about 9 o'clock in the evening. We see a weekday spike in kids' shows such as Charlie and Lola at around 7 o'clock, which I'm sure any parent here will completely understand. And we see a significant daytime spike at weekends, and in particular on Saturdays when viewing is nearly a third higher than weekdays. What's good to see is that users are accessing a broad range of programs. Unsurprisingly, Top Gear and Doctor Who are incredibly popular. However, we also see people leaning towards some unexpected content. Who would have guessed that The Secrets of Scientology, a panorama special, would turn out to be one of our most watched programs? I think it probably has a lot to do with John Sweeney's notorious rant. He did shout an awful lot, and it's the thing that probably keeps it well into the top 10. Across countries, we've also seen some very much kind of clear genre trends emerging. New specials and documentaries do particularly well in Ireland, but are incredibly unpopular in Australia. Our Antipodean friends are more enthusiastic about the selection of comedy on offer, unlike the Italians who tend to opt for drama. All countries show an interest in Doctor Who, but none more so than the 3 Nordic markets we cover, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. The audience in Germany is particularly fond of cookery shows, like The Naked Chef and Raymond Blanc's Kitchen Secrets, while the Canadians are really, as we've kind of said before, are dead keen, note the gag, terrible, on crime and thriller genres, Waking the Dead, Sherlock, Whitechapel, and the like, obviously as well as kind of period drama. The list goes on, and it is just quite interesting to see which countries like what. In terms of our individual shows, across the board, the favourites are Doctor Who, Top Gear, Waking the Dead, Charlie and Lola, and the cult comedy Gavin and Stacey. That said, Little Britain is also making a decent showing. That's not to say that it's all about the big titles, as I've said earlier. These major brands might be the things that draw people in, but it's the lesser-known titles such as Steptoe and Son and Yes Minister and Hidden Gems that make them want to stay. But what does any of this tell us? For one, I think it graphically demonstrates what I was talking about around the idea that VOD gives us a unique consumer insight. More importantly, however, whilst this early data is going to be skewed by a whole range of factors, it clearly shows that how a VOD service can quickly optimize itself to different territories by simply listening to its viewers and what they have to say. For instance, it's our ultimate ambition for the global iPlayer app to suggest recommendations based on real viewing habits. We can point to a very, very real picture of what fans of a particular show might find appealing. We know for certain that viewers of Light Rise to Candleford also enjoy other vintage and nostalgic titles like All Creatures Great and Small, Keeping Up Appearances and The Good Life, but they also tend to avoid the likes of Little Britain or Click, which is a technology program. At the other end, fans of Top Gear are also keen on Blackadder and Sherlock, but for some bizarre reason they give Gavin and Stacey and Ab Fab a wide berth. The essential point remains, though, that on global BBC iPlayer, the editorial decisions are already being made on a whole range of completely measurable and the new insight that is gained from existing viewer interaction and localized for each territory. So far, I've largely painted a quite rosy picture of our experiments with the pilot of the global iPlayer, but clearly it's not always that simple. There have inevitably been challenges and compromises along the way, but there have also been a range of new opportunities presented by us and by the pilot. The first challenge that nearly everybody raises, not least our own sales team, and they raise it quite a lot, is around cannibalization. In markets where we've already got a vibrant market for BBC content, what is the global iPlayer going to add? Isn't it simply going to cannibalize the existing viewers of both our own channels and those of our partners who we've been working with a lot over the years? We certainly want to build a strong global iPlayer, but we don't want to do it at the cost of our existing businesses. In my opinion, I don't believe in cannibalization. I worked at UK TV before this and ran their suite of 10 channels, and I didn't believe in cannibalization then, and I don't believe in it now. In the UK, where the iPlayer has been live for a lot longer and reaches obviously a far greater percentage of the viewing population, we see very much kind of all boats rising at once. iPlayer demand is growing vertiginously, and our linear broadcast channels are also experiencing healthy growth. As Jana Bennett, my boss and erstwhile director of Vision, obviously likes to remind people, she oversaw the launch of both the UK iPlayer whilst also running the BBC's portfolio of television channels, and she doesn't believe in cannibalization either. From a user point of view, we don't see it as an either-or decision. People aren't always going to want to sit down on the sofa and watch television with their viewing guided by linear schedules. However, there are other scenarios where people might want to watch television in ways which linear isn't previously enabled. In this way, the global iPlayer clearly becomes an additive medium. I think the clearest opportunity that the iPlayer has presented is about the power of a branded property. Our channel portfolios exist to enable us to display our content in a branded space, somewhere where we can maximize the impact of the BBC brand and create and leverage an editorial reputation that drives customer loyalty. Our viewers engage with the BBC brand and enjoy the confidence that it gives them in the quality of programming and editorial choice. A VOD platform like Global iPlayer does this, but more so. We have a greater editorial freedom outside of the shackles of a linear format, and we have the ability to present the best of the BBC in new and different ways. The editorial journeys that I was talking about enable us to take people into new areas of content that we might not have had the chance to lead them on in a linear channel, and that builds into a much stronger engagement with the BBC brand and helps to drive viewers to our content in other platforms. Perhaps the most important lesson so far relates back to what I was saying earlier about the long tail. We all know the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto's famous 80-20 rule, which in television says that 80% of our revenues come from the top 20% of our content. Well, from our experience, we reckon that this is changing. We're seeing it as more like 60-20. This means that the top 20% of our shows generate something like 60% of our total views, implying that the long tail is definitely doubled its share to 40%. This is a fundamental shift and one that has major implications. Get that word out. Let me start that sentence again. This is a fundamental shift and one that has major implications for the economics of businesses such as ours, as well as for consumer viewing habits on new platforms. As with any of this, these are all just early results based on a pilot project. But it's clear that there is a huge potential in video-on-demand platforms to bring about some important changes in how we all view our content portfolios. So, how can I sum up all of this? What neat conclusions can we and I draw? Anyway, first and perhaps most importantly, I want to emphasize that I don't see Global iPlayer as a threat to television businesses at any level of the value chain. We need to recognize that a Kodak Moment has happened, but at the same time there seems to be plenty of room for linear and on-demand to coexist. At the moment, they seem to fulfill a range of viewing needs and are largely additive rather than subtractive of overall viewing. We're not a pure-play VOD operation, and everything we do is viewed through the lens of a content owner with multiple business streams, so this knowledge is as important to us as it is to anybody else. Secondly, whilst new habits are emerging in a video-on-demand viewing, many of the traditional rules of television and editorial decision-making still apply. People still seem to watch roughly the same thing at around the same time. They might just also be doing additional viewing in slightly different places. What's most important is that we now know in much more detail what they're doing, how they're doing it, and to some extent why they're doing it. This applies particularly when you consider the impact of localization on editorial choices. VOD may be a global phenomenon, but you still have to consider your local audiences when making editorial decisions. We're reflecting this by building region-specific editorial journeys and taking into account local linear broadcasts in our windowing strategy. We said when we launched that we would work to ensure appropriate windows between content shown by our local partners and that available on the global BBC iPlayer, and that's something we're working on as we speak. And as we develop this, there's even the potential to build in cross-promotion between the journeys we develop on iPlayer and what's happening on our partner channels, something that even further underlines the potential for the global iPlayer to be an additive medium. The third important thing for us is that the global iPlayer is about more than just putting some shows up online. There's still an editorial aspect to what we do, and we know what our viewers like. It's this idea of serendipity being a value rather than an accident, and letting people find new shows through creative exposition rather than just pushing the latest big titles. Finally, I hope that what I've talked about here shows that VOD is definitely a reality, as we all know. And it's certainly not some far-off pipe dream that a lot of people in the linear space keep thinking about. We're seeing real people paying real money to access content on demand. And as long as we as an industry take these changes on board, then there's a real potential for everyone to benefit in the short, the medium, and the long term for this new world. Thank you very much.